West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's gone from bad to worse to even worse for Donald Trump. Of course, we reported earlier in the week Donald Trump unable to post a bond. He does not have the cash, and he can't find a surety in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case. Donald Trump bragged how rich he was, but then does not have the funds. He's still whining about that. More on that in a bit. Also, we learned from multiple CNBC scoops that Donald Trump simply is not able to fundraise anywhere near what you need to do to fundraise if you're going to be the Republican candidate for the presidency. He is down 65% from what he was doing in 2020, and we expect disastrous numbers to come out at any moment from the recording of this video about Trump's inability to fundraise. And then, of course, on Tuesday, more devastating news from Donald Trump across the country, as there was still some states that are having their Republican primary or primaries in these states. And while President Biden was hitting his usual number around winning about by 90% of the vote, Donald Trump in Florida, you had Nikki Haley still receive about 16% of the vote. Nikki Haley getting about 200,000 plus votes in Florida. And then in deep red Kansas, of all places, Donald Trump was below 75% of the vote in blood red Kansas. These Nikki Haley voters, these mainstream conservatives, these independent-minded voters who sometimes vote Republicans are simply not buying the scam, the bloodbath, the horror show, the carnage, and the just overall oddity and weirdness that Donald Trump and MAGA is trying to push and hoist upon our great country, our incredible democracy, our incredible Constitution. Look, I know anecdotally from the tens of thousands of stories that you all share with me, how many people have left the Republican Party that's gone full MAGA. Mainstream Republicans, mainstream conservatives, independents, people not affiliated with political parties. Y'all share your stories with me all the time, which I am so grateful for, having such a big audience that's representative of all the pro-democracy loving Americans. So just take a look at what Donald Trump's been posting and whining about. I mean, just go through post, and they're all stuff like this. He goes, Ngoran, referring to the judge presiding over the New York Attorney General civil fraud case. Ngoran wants me to put up a ridiculous fine. I did nothing wrong, ! Before I get a chance to appeal his crazed ruling. A first. No, that's not a first. That's the requirement for everybody who appeals a judgment against them. You have to post a bond that is at least equal to the amount of the judgment. Everybody goes through that. Donald Trump posts, Engoron will not do what the appellate division has ordered him to do on the statute of limitations. This has never happened to the appellate division before. Remember, he is the judge that fraudulently valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million and was already overturned 4 times on this case, a record. And by the way, I'm not going to read you these others because, you get it. Post, like dozens of these throughout the day. 17, 20, 25 posts like this. Post. And by the way, he's still bragging like a maniac how rich he claims he is, and that he claims that Mar-a-Lago's really worth somewhere between 1.8 billion and 3.5 billion. Okay, if it's really worth that amount of money, Donald Trump, then why can't you just refi because you have ostensibly a ton of equity if the property's really valued that much? Why can't you refinance it, get a loan, and come up with the cash to post this bond? I mean, that would seem to be easy if you're this rich and you have all of this cash. And then, by the way, during Florida's primary, which once again, Donald Trump underperforming, which I just talked about, what does he talk about during the primaries? That I have a lot of cash. I'm not going to give it to the court, but I have a lot of cash. I mean, ostensibly saying that will undercut your claim that you filed, not ostensibly accurately, in the court where you said you don't have the cash. Here, play this clip.
Are you confident that you can pay the court $64 million?
I built a great company, one of the greatest companies anywhere in the country, especially when it comes to real estate. Have some of the greatest assets in the world. And this is a rigged trial. This was a rigged trial by a crooked judge and a crooked attorney general. And we're fighting it out with them. We have a lot of cash and we have a great company, but they want to take it away, or at least take the cash element away. Billions of dollars in value, billions of dollars in properties, but they'd like to take the cash away so I can't use it on the campaign. And this is just a corrupt group of people. It's election interference, and we'll see how the courts rule on it. And I'll be guided by the courts.
And then, of course, you have Melania basically saying that we will see if she'll participate in any campaign stops. Play this clip.
Mrs. Trump, are you going to return to the campaign trail with your husband? Stay tuned. Are you confident that you can pay the court?
This is what Donald Trump had to say about former Vice President Pence. Play this clip.
What's your reaction to Vice President Pence saying that you can't endorse?
Oh, I couldn't care less. We need patriots. We need strong people in our country.
And here's what Donald Trump had to also say. He said that he thinks that Jewish people don't love their religion if they don't vote for Donald Trump. That's what Donald Trump said. Here, play this clip.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Okay, so take a look at the ranting and ravings of Donald Trump right there, and let's compare it to what President Biden was saying on the same day. Here's President Biden talking about issues. Play this clip.
Second, my plan goes to work so we can bring the rents down. My administration is cracking down on big corporations who break antitrust laws by price fixing to keep the rents up. That's how they work it out. Landlords should be competing to give folks the best deal, not conspiring to charge them more. We're also going after what I call unfair rental and junk fees. Like the ones you charge when you move into an apartment. One of those surprise convenience fees that aren't convenient at all. You can add up to hundreds of dollars.
Here's another clip of President Biden. Let's play it.
We've already created tens of thousands of good-paying jobs right here in this state as well, by the way. Clean jobs, clean energy jobs. Trump lost millions of jobs, millions when he was president.
And here's another clip of President Biden.
Look, the bottom line is, when you think about it, all of us in this room have one fundamental difference between us and Trump. I mean it sincerely. We have a different value set. It gets, to me, I've been campaigning around the country and been in this job for 3 years, and it's, it makes it, the more I thought about it, it's just fundamentally different. You mentioned vets. Well, this is a guy who said when he wouldn't go up to visit a cemetery of veterans that they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was one of those losers and suckers. You know, it's just, I've never heard a president say the things that this guy has said. But the difference is he means them. He means what he says. With your help, we got elected the first time around. And this county and this state is really, really, really critical.
By the way, CNN spoke with senior sources in the Trump campaign, who said that they're not going to stop this hateful and violent rhetoric that they've been using. Play the clip.
Jake, yeah. When you talk to campaign advisors or aides, you don't get any sense that he's going to change his rhetoric, that he's going to tamp down the kind of language that he uses. In fact, they say they know who their candidate is. And keep in mind, we have not heard Republicans in any way largely coming out to rebuke Donald Trump's comments. And in fact, his campaign doubled down on what he said. And this is what they said in a statement. President Trump is right. The Democrat Party has turned into a full-blown anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist cabal. There is a clear messaging problem with Donald Trump and several of these various minority groups.
Should be noted, on the same day, Donald Trump sued ABC and sued George Stephanopoulos, saying that they defamed Donald Trump because Trump was found liable for sexual assault and sexual abuse in the in the E. Jean Carroll New York case. When Donald Trump says that he was not found liable for rape, even though if you go look at the federal judge's opinion, the federal judge says that Donald Trump's conduct that constitutes sexual abuse also constitutes rape, and also New York has amended their statute to make it clear that Donald Trump's conduct regarding E. Jean Carroll and that type of conduct fits the statutory definition of it as well. But that's what Donald Trump is spending his time doing, while you have President Biden out there talking about issues that matter to the American people. Compare, by the way, what CNN says President Biden's doing. He's going around to swing states, and President Biden's, again, talking about what he can deliver for the people, talking about things he has delivered for the people, whether it comes to healthcare, whether it comes to infrastructure, over 40,000 infrastructure projects across the country, whether it's reducing the price of insulin, whether it's bringing the semiconductor industry here and more. Here's what CNN has to say about how President Biden is running things. Play this clip.
President Biden is kicking off a multi-day swing of battleground states out in the West, stumping in Nevada and Arizona later today to discuss various kitchen table issues. Trump, meantime, is focusing in on his own legal problems, and they are enormous.
I thought this clip was incredible. Here on Morning Joe, you had Donnie Deutsch, who's Jewish, talks about how his feeling about what Donald Trump said that I showed you earlier. Play this clip.
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew and not be a good Jew, and what it takes to love Israel and not love Israel. First of all, you stand for nothing what Judaism is all about being a decent human being, about being kind to others. You are the farthest thing from what anybody should say what a good Jew is or isn't. And make no mistake about it, for anybody who says, I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's automatically good for Israel, he would turn on Jews in a second. This is a guy who has a fondness for Hitler, according to his ex-chief of staff, John Kelly. This is a guy who said there's good people on both sides of Charlottesville. He would turn on Jews in a second if it was in his best interest. I know this could be very controversial. He doesn't care about Israel. He cares about Donald Trump. And how dare you tell me what it takes to be a good Jew or not?
And finally, here's former, very conservative Republican by the name of Joe Walsh, friend of the Midas Touch show, friend of the Midas Touch podcast. Here's what he had to say about Donald Trump. Here, play this clip.
Joe, what did you think when you saw that?
It's just divisive. Every single word, Jim, that he is uttering and will utter during this campaign is divisive, dividing Jewish people, dividing Americans. It's not going to stop. He's the leader of the Republican Party. He's the Republican Party nominee. He's been a fraud and a con man his whole life. And this entire campaign, Jim, is going to be about him beginning to be held accountable for those crimes. And all he's going to do is cry, bitch, and moan about it. But his followers love it because he's the great victim.
So, folks, a devastating few weeks for Donald Trump here. I'm not, I'm not big on polls. Suffice to say that in many of the polls that are coming out now, President Biden is pulling ahead. I don't want to go do a whole poll analysis, but I do want to at least mention that. I think it's worth mentioning, but I don't want to even think about that. I want us all to do our work and make sure we spread these messages of pro-democracy, spread these messages about our love of our Constitution, our love of our country, our love of our flag, our love of our democracy, and Donald Trump's hatred of that love, Donald Trump's hatred of what our country truly stands for. How Donald Trump does things like praise insurrectionists, calls them hostages, and changes the words of our national anthem. Donald Trump created a ode, a song for the insurrectionists that he plays instead of the national anthem, butchering the words of our national anthem and praising the January 6th insurrectionists who he calls hostages at the beginning of every one of his events. That is utterly despicable, and if you stand for that, then you don't stand with the United States of America.
It is Wednesday, the 20th of March of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl. And she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Oh my God. Yes, we had a separation of church and state, but apparently, I guess, that has been thrown asunder. And do we just have to live with it? Or do we get to go back to what the founders originally intended? You ever notice how originalism is so original they make it into a fiction? They have to make it up to make it that original. Talking about what the Supreme Court did in terms of the Supremacy Clause, and fortunately a lower court issued a stay. So that's going to get bumped up to the Supreme Court, and they're going to say that the lower court didn't have jurisdiction. But, something has to be done. Apparently, some judges in the lower courts are saying, I think that they are making it well aware that the MAGA SCOTUS cannot just issue the enabling acts willy-nilly. Okay, and that seems like what they've been doing. And it took them a long time to get where they are. Will it take as long to stop it? Let's hope not, because we won't be America anymore, will we? We will not be these United States. Something entirely different. We often thought, when I say we, my group of friends and I, we used to sit around and ponder the future. And one future that we pondered was, what would happen if the most powerful country in the history of the world, even more than the Romans, the Mongols, all of them, the most powerful nation in the history of the world went Nazi? Now, other types of people, and when I say types of people, I mean older people like Philip K. Dick and others would write about dystopian futures that pondered that exact same issue. But we thought a little bit more pragmatically about it. How would it happen? And to allay our fears and our concerns, though, we would always sum up with, it can happen here. It just cannot happen here. This is America. Ultimately, we punch Nazis. And even though we have a ketamine-addled blood emerald air pretty much dictating what's on the airwaves, becoming a Nazi doesn't seem such a bad idea. The trains will run on time. The only problem is that the Nazis in this country do not know how to make the trains run on time. Jeez, if only. Okay. So some people are burying their heads in the sand, and I can tell you how they are doing that, by flying Trump 2024 flags with the motto underneath, "We support the police." And every time I see that flag at the end of the cul-de-sac here in the little hamlet of Rogue River where I live, every time I see my neighbor's flag with that statement, I think of January 6th. And I think of all those cops who were getting their heads bashed in, and worse. But if you were to put it to the MAGA, they would just claim that those aren't real cops. They're not real cops. They're the deep state. They have to be torn asunder. That is the order from on high, and every bad behavior is justified. Nothing that the mobster does is wrong. Only wrong can be done to the mobster. I mean, it's like, hasn't anybody seen a mobster movie in the last 60, 70 years? My God. I have to argue with people, MAGA types, about whether Trump is a mobster or a bad business person. They are absolutely believers that he is the most successful person in the world, and we're just jealous. We have Trump derangement syndrome. The only derangement syndrome about Trump that exists is in MAGA. Jeez. Do I have a predisposed dislike for this guy? Only because it has been, shall we say, tempered over, maybe 60-some years. Nah, maybe not that long. Maybe more like 15. Yeah. Maybe more like 55. 50 years at least. Because I became aware of this guy before he got fined, along with his dad, who marched with the KKK, by the way, were fined the largest HUD fine in history for racial housing discrimination in New York. It wasn't as if that story was buried on page 16, A16 of the New York Times. That was on the front page. Confront the MAGA with that fact. And first of all, they think that's a great deal. You mean he was trying to keep black people from renting in his high-price places? No, they were slumlords. Give me a break. How do you think Papa Trump made his money? He was a slumlord mobster. But these people seem to pretend that, no, there was nothing wrong that he did. And if he did anything, well, it was only because people hated him because he was so successful. And I think they got that from The Apprentice. And I think that the producer, what's that guy's name again? Burnett? I think that he needs to be hauled in front of Congress. Because this isn't his first attempt at modeling someone to be a figurehead, telegenic, to essentially be the Antichrist and bring the whole world down. God, these guys are evil. And I hate that term. How do you tell? How you can't ascribe evil to people. It's just superstition. But in this case, I think that it aptly describes the person and the behavior. I think that there's a psychological term for that. For a term for the evil person and for the people ascribing evil to others. So I'll try to take care and not become too obsessed with it. So were we predisposed to dislike this guy because he was rich, a spoiled rich boy who then went out there and flaunted his wealth, conspicuous consumption? I mean, Trump embodied that whole... I got to tell you, to me, that felt icky. Maybe other people, they like it. I'm going to keep up with the Joneses. If that guy's wearing a mink coat, I got to wear too. I always thought conspicuous consumption was telling the world that you are conspicuously so insecure, you got to put on the trappings that there's greatness about me. Look how much I spent. I'm great. I don't know. I just thought that was maybe a character flaw, and why would I want to flaunt that? I know, just live with yourself and accept yourself for who you are. Well, I don't know. If you're doing bad behavior, why would you want to accept that? Would you want to change it instead? I'm going to flaunt my bad behavior. I'm going to flaunt that I'm a dick. No, maybe we should change from being dicks. And then you don't go around pointing a finger at yourself saying, look, I'm not a dick anymore. That makes you a dick again. Doesn't anybody teach boys this anymore? Or did they ever? Was I just one of the few? I don't know. There was a fine line between protecting the little kids from the bullies and becoming a bully against the bullies. That can happen because the bullies, generally are weak in character. They have to make up for their insecurities by pounding on little kids. I feel better now. I don't feel so small. I feel big. So there was a few of us who were of size, more gumption, that stood between those types and the smaller ones who were just trying to get through the day. What's wrong with that? I'm not going to like this kid because he's timid. Give me a break. But at what point do you become a terror to the bullies? Fine line. Very fine line to walk there. But kids are kids, and I don't know why we're living in a world at this point where, I'm bumping 70. I don't know about you. But 70 is not 7. Why is the world behaving like 7-year-olds? Jeez. Okay, maybe 8 to 12. Maybe. I used to complain it was because we were all acting like high schoolers. I wish we were old enough to be acting like high schoolers. Jeez. At least we'd be trying to figure out if we're going to be on the prom committee or out there smoking cigarettes with the hoods. Not everybody that smoked cigarettes in what we called Marlboro country were hoods. But a lot of them were. I mean, let's be clear. You didn't find very many hoods, at least at the time, on the prom float committee. Maybe later when they were embezzling funds from companies and putting in their wives' names, so when they spent their time in stir, they could come out and they still could experience the wealth that they accumulated illegally. Yeah, that happened. In my school. It was a scandal. Just for a little bit. Anyway, sometimes you learn young. I didn't want to have a life like that. I am so glad that my parents weren't into embezzling money, using bankruptcy as a economic strategy. The idea of pointing a finger at yourself saying, oh, look, I got a Stanford PhD. That never happened in my family. And I liked it. You don't need to brag about what you've done. You just do it. So maybe people need to sit coaches down like Tuberville, who says that liberals are Satan and they've destroyed our schools. This is a guy whose annual salary would have covered almost 30 tenured professors who taught real classes. 30. And not just for 1 year, for 5 years. His yearly salary would have supported 28 to 30 tenured professors for 5 years. And he is saying that it's Democrats and liberals who have corrupted our educational system? This is the guy that beat Doug Jones, who took on the KKK and won. And who were the KKK? The people that killed Emmett Till. And for that, he was punished, and so was the rest of America, and we get Tuberville. Someone needs to sit that cracker down and teach him a few lessons about whether liberals are satanic or not. Read Catcher in the Rye of that guy. Then move him right on into Voltaire. Why not? All right. We could go on in this mode, but we're not. We're going to give you a rundown about what we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe of this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, at the top, Trump is in total panic mode. He's getting it from all sides, and I got to tell you, it is a sight to see. We love it. On the rest of the menu, a new clerk was chosen to oversee elections in a deep red rural Nevada county, or is that Nevada? Well, that county's been roiled by false claims of widespread election fraud since 2020. So bad that Republican election officials have been called satanic. Witches, they're witches. A bill approved by the Rhode Island Senate would require all firearms to be locked when not in use. Well, that's going to go to the Supreme Court. It's unconstitutional to make me lock my gun. Really? And Stellantis, the maker of Jeep, Dodge, and Ram vehicles, has agreed to follow California's strict emissions standards. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Moldovan authorities expelled a Russian diplomat after Moscow opened polling stations for its presidential election in Moldova's pro-Russia breakaway region of Transnistria. A little wordy, but I had to say it. And Hong Kong lawmakers unanimously approved a security law giving the government more power to curb dissent. And when they say government, they mean Beijing. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link that is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink once a month, we're able to pool those Patreonages with others of like-minded individuals who have Patreonaged their coffees to us once a month, and then we are able to put a big dent in the bills and other costs that are accrued. I'm being wordy here like a bookkeeper. Nonetheless, let's make it clear. Your help helps us pay our bills, and then we can fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting 14 years now. Wow. Certainly 13. I got to count it up again. It goes by quick to some people. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. We're continuing on here, and it is because of you, because you are truly our biggest contributor. Yeah. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on the social media platforms, you can do so by following at Netroots Radio. And Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on social media as well at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary, not stories. I'm an old guy. They are diaries. Anyway, that gets posted 10 minutes before showtime. And that way you have quick access to the actual reportage from the actual reporters. And that's important. It really is. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, even on Audible now. Yeah, we're there. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is by staff at the Associated Press. A new clerk was chosen yesterday, Tuesday, to oversee elections in a deep red rural Nevada county, Nevada, that has been roiled by false claims of widespread election fraud since 2020. Nye County Commissioners appointed Corey Friedhoff to step into the position at the end of the month when Mark Kempf, the county's current top elections official, steps down. Kempf, who led a controversial hand count of votes in the 2022 midterms during his brief tenure, handpicked his replacement, and that would be Friedhoff. Or is it Friedhoff? Friedhoff. He hasn't said why he is resigning. We can only imagine. At a county commission meeting yesterday, Tuesday, Kampf said he had worked very hard to train Friedhoff, a deputy clerk in his office. Kampf stepped into the position in 2022. He had been recruited by Jim Marchant, a Republican candidate for Secretary of State that year, who claimed every Nevada elected official since 2006 was installed by the deep state cabal, and led a group of 17 election deniers across the country, running mainly for state election offices. Marchant, along with 15 of the Republican coalition members, lost their races as part of a larger rebuke of far-right candidates casting doubt on elections. So let's just put those guys into election administration. Steve LeBlanc of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Rhode Island Senate approved a bill yesterday, Tuesday, that would require all firearms, when not being used by the owner or another authorized user, to be stored in a locked container or equipped with a tamper-resistant mechanical lock. Under the bill, the unsafe storage of a firearm would be considered a civil offense that could be punished by a fine of up to $250 for a first offense and $1,000 for a second. Any subsequent violation would be punishable by up to 6 months in prison and a fine of up to $500. The measure passed by a 28-7 vote. The bill's sponsor, Democratic Senator Pamela Lauria, said responsible gun owners already take precautions, but those steps should be a requirement, not an option. Unsecured guns have harmed countless children, as well as family members or friends who have accessed them for the purpose of suicide or crime. When a gun is not under the owner's control, it is not safe anywhere unless it is secured, Lauria said. An analysis released last year by the Pew Research Center found that the number of children and teens killed by gunfire in the United States increased 50% between 2019 and 2021, based on mortality statistics from the CDC. Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Sophie Austin from the Associated Press. Stellantis, one of the largest automakers in the world, agreed yesterday, Tuesday, to comply with California's vehicle emission standards that are the toughest in the nation and require zero-emission and plug-in hybrid vehicles to make up 68% of new light-duty vehicle sales by 2030. The move by the company that makes vehicles for Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep was seen as a boost to Governor Gavin Newsom's ambitious policies to curtail global warming. The Biden administration restored the state's authority to set its own tailpipe pollution standards for cars in 2022 after Trump's decision to revoke California's authority to set its own limits on auto emissions. It was one of Trump's most high-profile actions to roll back environmental rules he considered overly burdensome on businesses. Stellantis now joins four big automakers, Ford, Honda, Volkswagen, and BMW, that agreed to follow California's rules in 2019. The Trump administration then launched an antitrust investigation of those companies, but eventually closed it after failing to find any wrongdoing. Indeed. All right, let us now get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
Powered by Unity Networks. You are listening to networksradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Imagination Wanted. Despite its title, the new Blumhouse release, Imaginary, could use some imagination. It's a shame because it could have been a genuinely scary movie and includes a plethora of themes that could have made for an interesting film, including childhood trauma, mental illness, loss, and the difficulties that arise from being a step-parent. However, despite its potential, Imaginary never quite gets off the ground. Set in modern-day Mississippi, it tells the tale of Jessica, DeWanda Wise, a successful children's author and illustrator who moves into her childhood home with her new husband and 2 stepdaughters. The transition is hard on all, but especially the younger girl, Alice. So when she starts to take solace in a teddy bear she finds in the basement and claims it as an imaginary friend, it seems like a good thing. That is, of course, until Alice's new friend starts persuading her to engage in behavior that becomes increasingly more disturbing and dangerous as things progress. The idea of a child's powerful imagination and the blurring of the line between reality and fantasy is not a new one. Even Alice's name is reminiscent of a certain classic children's story. While director Jeff Wadlow could have taken this further and even perhaps have shown a darker take on the Alice story, instead he relies on common horror movie tropes and the whole thing starts to feel like a paint-by-numbers, middling horror story. It's too bad because both Wise and Piper Braun, the child who plays Alice, are quite good and do the best they can with the material. However, that's not nearly enough to make up for the flaws in Imaginary. Despite a few scares, no dying of fright here, you're more likely to doze off from boredom. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. January 21st was the 14th anniversary of the U.S. Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, which opened the floodgates of money in political campaigns. In Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, over $300 million has already been spent in just 3 early races. CNN reports that $77 million was spent in the New Hampshire primary by super PACs, candidates, and political groups. New Hampshire's population is just 1.4 million people, and an estimated $55 in advertising was spent for every man, woman, and child in the Granite State. An estimated turnout of 410,000 voters calculates to $188 spent per primary vote. Democracy group End Citizens United said over $11 billion has been spent in federal elections since the 2010 court decision. Most spending in elections now comes not from candidates, but political action committees allied with them. End Citizens United notes that 96% of outside spending has occurred since the Citizens United decision. In the early Republican races alone, NPR reports that Nikki Haley's campaign spent $9.3 million, but her super PAC and Cookbook Americans for Prosperity spent $62.8 million. The DeSantis campaign and PAC spent a combined $60 million, and Trump a combined $54 million. We have more on primary spending at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1905. That was the day a boiler explosion destroyed the R.B. Grover shoe factory in Brockton, Massachusetts. The boiler exploded as workers arrived for the day shift. 58 workers were killed, and another 150 were injured. The boiler reportedly shot up through all 3 floors and the roof of the building. The floors collapsed and the walls caved in. Those who survived the initial explosion were fatally trapped by debris and machinery. Fires spread rapidly throughout the plant, ignited by broken gas lines and industrial solvents. The entire block, including nearby homes and businesses, were leveled to the ground. Many of the dead were never positively identified. The Leather Workers Union provided financial assistance. So did R.B. Grover, who was ruined financially by the disaster. Boiler inspectors concluded the explosion was caused by a manufacturing defect that was virtually impossible to detect. The courts held no one liable. By 1890, over 100,000 boilers providing steam heat were in use. Over 2,000 had exploded during the 1880s alone. The American Society of Mechanical Engineers had been in existence for some 25 years by the time the boiler exploded at Grover. They had released some guidelines, but it was clear that inspections were rare and standards were needed. The public outcry only grew in Massachusetts after another industrial boiler explosion occurred the next year. The state passed measures establishing rules of operation. By 1914, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers had successfully pushed back against manufacturers and railroad managers who opposed boiler regulations. They published the first edition of the National Boiler and Pressure Vessel Code. A national board of inspectors soon followed. Since then, regulations ensuring safe operation and maintenance have saved countless lives.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only in the mid-60s. We'd been in the mid to upper 70s in days previous. A mix of clouds and sun during the morning will give way to mostly cloudy skies this afternoon. Winds out of the west-northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, so a little bit more brisk than what we've had recently as well. Mostly cloudy skies early tonight, then partly cloudy after midnight. Lows in the low 40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, then partly to mostly cloudy tomorrow. Highs once again in the mid-60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it some rain overnight Thursday, and then beginning Friday, not less than 3/4 of an inch for the rest of the weekend, and looks like for the rest of the week. We'll keep an eye on that. Pollen is rated as none here in our little hamlet of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 17 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains moderate, though it has ticked up to level 4. Regardless, take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.03 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 62 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 70 degrees and sunny. Rome is 65 and sunny. Bagram is, that would be Kabul, is 50 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 58 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 54 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 52 and sunny. Chicago, Illinois is 35 degrees sunny with a gale watch continuing from yesterday. And New York, New York is 48 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy with another small craft advisory. And that is weather from around the world, Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Moldova said yesterday, Tuesday, it has expelled a Russian diplomat after Moscow opened polling stations for its presidential election in Moldova's pro-Russia breakaway region of Transnistria. Relations are increasingly fraught between Russia and Moldova, whose pro-Western government has firmly opposed Russia's full-scale war in neighboring Ukraine. Moldova summoned Russia's ambassador to protest against the Kremlin's decision to open 6 polling stations in Transnistria, contrary to the position of the Moldovan authorities, the foreign ministry said. It was informed that the ambassador, or it said it informed the ambassador that an unnamed embassy worker was a collaborator who was declared persona non grata and must leave the country. Russia had previously agreed to open just one polling station at its embassy in Moldova's capital of Chisinau. Russia has opened polling stations in Transnistria in previous presidential elections as well. But Moldovan officials have repeatedly accused of Russia of conducting a hybrid war against their country by funding anti-government protests. Now listen to this. Meddling in local elections and running vast disinformation campaigns to try to topple the government and derail the country from its path toward full European membership. Familiar, huh? Well, Transnistria was declared a breakaway state by pro-Russia forces after a short war in the early 1990s. It is not recognized by any UN member country, including Russia, which maintains close ties to the region that is home to about 220,000 Russian citizens. Russia maintains about 1,500 troops in the region as so-called peacekeepers who guard Soviet-era weapons and ammunition stockpiles, and a large number of Russian citizens in Transnistria also hold Moldovan passports. Moldova is set to hold a referendum on EU membership later this year, along with its own presidential election. The country was granted EU candidate member status in June of 2022, and Brussels, in December of last year, said it would open accession negotiations for both Moldova and Ukraine. Leung of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Hong Kong lawmakers unanimously approved a new national security law that grants the government more power to quash dissent, widely seen as a Latest step in a sweeping political crackdown triggered by pro-democracy protests in 2019. The legislature passed the Safeguarding National Security Bill during a special session. The legislature passed the Safeguarding National Security Bill during a special session. The law will expand authorities' ability to prosecute citizens for offenses including colluding with external forces to commit illegal acts, like reading a newspaper, as well as charge them with treason, insurrection, espionage, and disclosing state secrets, among others. Like telling people what the weather is in Hong Kong. It comes on top of a similar security law being imposed by Beijing from 2020, which has already largely silenced opposition voices in the financial hub. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.